Hello and welcome to this first video in the game development series. If you find this video informative, please help support my website by going to www.maticknows.com and clicking on the PayPal donate button. Okay, so let's begin. In this video, we'll be creating the Visual Studio project where the game engine will sit. Now, I'm using Visual Studio 2003. You can use other compilers to create this game engine. However, be aware that different compilers have different settings, so you may get some compiler differences when you're linking in and compiling your code. Feel free to send those questions and concerns to me, and I'll see if I can help you out. If you are using Visual Studio 2005 Express Edition, there are certain features which I'll be using in the game engine which are not supported by the Express, so you'll need to get either Visual Studio 6, 2003, or to 2005 Pro Edition. Okay, so to begin, let's go to File, New, Project, and we want to create a Win32 project, so we'll select those there. And here we want to just select Visual Studio project, and we're going to call this Game Engine. And you'll notice it's going to create a directory under Visual Studio project called Game Engine. We'll click OK, and then under Application Setting here, I'm going to select Empty Project, and we're creating a Windows application type here. And select Finish, and there we go. So let's save that, and now take a look. Let's take a look under Windows Explorer here, and we see in the location where we created that game engine, we have 4 files here for our project, and nothing else. So, first thing we want to do is create some empty files here that we're going to start putting some code into. So we can do this by just right-clicking and going Add, New Item, and we want to add a C++ code, and let's see, we'll actually no, before we do that, I want to structure my code in some folders here. I don't want to put everything just in the root, so what I'm going to do here is under the source files, I'm going to add a new folder, and I'm going to call this main, and I'm going to repeat this for the header as well, and call it main as well. This is where the main CPP files are going to sit, and then once I start adding other modules, I'll also create directories here. Now, to stay consistent, I'll go into Windows Explorer here and create that same folder here. I'll call it main as well. Alright. Now, we can go and create some new files. So we'll go Add New Item, and we'll add a .cpp file. And I'll just call it main like this. And the location where I want to put it into would be this main folder which I just created. And I'll click Open. Okay, you see it created a main, and if we go into Windows Explorer here, we see it's located there. However, in the Solution Explorer, it's not located in that folder, so I'm just going to take it and move it into that folder there. So this folder structure is not the same folder structure you have on your hard drive. It's just internal to Visual Studio. Now, the other file that we're going to add here is related to the precompiled headers. So if we go under Project and Game Engine Properties, let me just take a look here under C, C++, Preprocessor, Precompiled Headers. Okay, right now it says not using precompiled headers, but we will be using them. So if we go in here, I'll add 2 files for the precompiled headers, and then I'll link them into our project. So first let's add those files in. Add New Item. We need a CPP file, and we'll call it STDAFx. And again, we want to put it into that main directory. And again, we'll just move it over into the main. And the other file we want to create is a .h file, and again, it's called STDAFx, and we'll put it in the main. and this time we just drag it over here. Notice that Visual Studio automatically knew to put the .h files into the source files, or sorry, the .cpp files into the source files and the .h files into the header files. Alright, so now we should have 3 empty files here. The easiest one to work with is the STDAFx CPP, so we'll start there. This file just contains one include, and it's going to include the STDAFx.h file. And that's all it's going to do. Now, if you're not familiar with precompiled headers, the way that they work is you want to use precompiled headers when you're creating a large project that's going to have a lot of includes. Every time you make any changes to your code and you go to compile it, whatever information or include files you have in your precompiled headers, they won't get compiled every time for you. They only get compiled once. And then thereafter, the Visual Studio knows to use already the existing compiled code. So it's very helpful to put all the windows, includes, and things like that inside the precompiled headers, since you know you're not going to be changing them. Your own code, though, you don't put in the precompiled header files. Instead, you put in your own main CPP and so on, because you do want to be compiling that code. So this is just for the precompiled headers, and you'll see which files we're going to be including in here. So we're done with this one. I can close it off. Now, with this effects, let me show you what that looks like. You'll notice that at the very top we have if not defined, then define it. And then at the very end here we have an end if. So what happens is every time we include this .h file, it's going to check to see if this variable here has been defined. If it hasn't, then it's going to include it. However, on the second time it comes into this file, it'll already have it defined, so it won't redefine all this code. This is just like a little compiler thing that we do so that we make sure that all of our includes don't get included more than once. Now, currently in the precompiled headers, we're defining something called Win32 lean and mean, and that makes sure that when we include the windows.h file, it's not going to include things that we're not going to be using. So it's just a little extra variable here we add, and it has to be added before this include. Now, whenever we start writing more code, we're going to start adding in extra includes into here, and you'll see me doing this in a minute. Let's just save that and close that off. And then we're back at the main.cpp. In our main, we'll have a include, and we're including that precompiled header file, and then we have just our WinMain function call with standard parameters, and we return 0. So right now our program doesn't do anything, and let's save that as well. Okay, now before we can actually compile this and get this program just to run, we need to set a couple things up in our project. So just click here on GameEngine and go to Properties. Now, we want to use precompiled headers, so we'll go here and select Use Precompiled Header, and then under the Create/Use, we'll just click down here, and you notice automatically it selects STDAFx.h. The reason why I chose this name is because this is the default name that Visual Studio uses, so I knew to create this ahead of time and call it STDAFx. And again, if we just click down here, then it just fills in this information automatically for us. And click Apply. And the other thing I change here is under the General Settings. Currently I have the output directory set to debug. I want to change that, and I just want to put an underscore in front of that debug. And you'll see why I do this in a second. Everything else here should be okay. Oh yes, the other thing we need to do is then click on main here. It's asking me to save those changes on the underscore, so I click yes. Okay, I click on main here, and you notice that under the C++ precompiled headers, it says use precompiled headers. This is correct. However, under the STDAFx.cpp, it also says use precompiled headers. Well, this one is the precompiled header, so I can't use it here. I actually have to create it. So I select create precompiled header, and that should do the trick. Okay. Oh yes, and the other thing that I need to do here is under General, I have to specify some additional include directories. Since I've moved these files here into the main folder, I have to include that in the settings here. So just double click, and then I go, let's see, let me think here. The directory structure of the following program is like this. If we go back here into our program, we see we have the GameEngine. This is the location where we're sitting right now. And we have the main code. So we actually have to go into the main folder to see all this code here. So if we go back here, we do /_main like that. And that should work. Okay, click OK. Oh, save that. Oh, I made a little mistake there. I changed that include path only for the STDAFx. So let me take that out here, and instead of selecting it here, I want to select the GameEngine and change that up here, like that. Okay. Well, let's save this and try to compile it and see what happens. So it's compiling the precompiled headers, and then it compiled the precompiled headers and then the main.cpp. It linked everything together and seemed to be okay. Now, if we run this code, it should basically do nothing and exit with 0, which it does. Okay, so everything seems to be up and running fine right now. Now, the first thing we want to do in the game is make sure that our game that we're going to be creating can only have one instance of itself running at any one point in time. And the way we can ensure this is by using a mutex. So let's take a look at this code here. At the very beginning, we create a variable here called STDAFx or game name, and currently it's just called name of game. You can type in whatever you want, whatever the name of your game is in here. Then we create a handle to a mutex, and we call co-initialize here because mutex, this create mutex needs this to be initialized or else it won't work. And then we create a mutex. And it's going to be a named mutex, and the name of it is going to be szGameName, which happens to be this value here, name of game. Now, upon creation, it returns this handle to our mutex. If the handle happens to be null, or if we get an error message saying that that handle already exists, the name handle already exists, then we're going to go in here and we're going to close the handle and display an error message saying that this application is already running in a different window. I'll just edit this a little bit here just to look a little nicer. And then we return with a 1. Otherwise, we return 0. Now, one other thing I want to do here is if we were to just go and run this code right now, it wouldn't work the second time through because it would go create this handle and then it exits 0. But then next time you run it, it's going to say it already exists because we didn't delete the mutex. So we need to delete it before we actually exit our code. So in here we'll have game code. I'll just leave it blank for now. And then on the bottom here, we need this. We need to close the handle and then uninitialize. So that will fix that problem. Okay, let's try to build this. And we see we have some errors. Oh yes, we're getting error messages here for these co-initialize and co-uninitialize because we didn't include the headers that have these function calls. Well, let's go into our precompiled header file here and add those in. Co-initialize and co-uninitialize use objbase.h, and create mutex uses winbase.h. If you want to see how I knew to use these, you can go into MSDN. So in MSDN here, if you type in co-initialize, you'll get the screen here. And at the very bottom, it says it uses the header objbase.h, and it uses this library here, ole32.lib. So let's copy that, and actually we'll do that later if it complains. The other thing we need to do is create mutex. Check this one out, and we see at the very bottom it's declared in winbase.h. So winbase.h and objbase.h. Okay, let's save that and try to build it again. Okay, so now it seems to work, and if we run it, it seems to run okay, and it returns 0, and if we run it a second time, it seems to still work and return 0. Now let me demonstrate to you this how the mutex works. What I can do is just put a sleep command in here, and I'll just make the program sleep for, let's say, how many seconds? 10 seconds, like this, and I'll build that. So if we go into our code here, under the debug, this is where our GameEngine is. If I double click on this, it's going to run for 10 seconds. But while it's running, I'm going to double click on that to run a second instance. But you notice it gives me this error message saying application has already been started in a different window. We don't see that window that it's running because I haven't displayed anything, but it is running in memory. So if you just wait for 10 seconds for it to finish, then you can go back and double click on it and it'll run for the next 10 seconds. So you see there is some code, you don't really see it working yet, but it is working. Actually, I can demonstrate this a little better if I use a message box instead of a sleep. So let me delete that and just replace this and say, go to here. Okay, so when you run it, I'm going to display a message say game started, and I'll just use an OK box. Okay, so now when we run the code, we see we have this window that pops open, and when I click OK, the program finishes. So now let's go back in here, and I'll start this guy. So the one instance of the program is running, and it's still running because it has this window open. And if I double click on here, it says I can't start a second application. No matter how many times I try, it won't let me. Well, if I go back to the first one, click OK to finish it, now I can go through and run a second instance. Notice it didn't complain. So that's the way that mutex is working. Now there's just one other thing I want to just change here in this code to get it ready for the next video. Instead of returning 0, I'm going to create a variable, and I'm just going to call it iReturn, and I'm going to initially set it to 0 and then just return the variable here. The reason why I do this is because in the next video I'll be adding code here, and the code is going to determine what the return value should be. So I may be returning 1, I may be returning 0, and so I need a variable to store that information. Alright, so that's it for the first video. Come back for the next one, and we'll be adding in an error handler into the GameEngine.